sand. I brought surfing back to the Oregon coast, even though the water was freezing and the rain was endless, and there were no tans or hot sand babes, because when I surfed, I felt California cool. Surf and adventure became my identity. I had fallen forever in love with both of them. The years passed, but the ideal of living a cinematic life did not fade. I went to university in Orange County, California, so I could surf before class. I spent semesters in Cairo learning Arabic and at Oxford because T.E. Lawrence had gone there. I became obsessed with fashion, realizing that the cinematic life demands amazing costume design. Looking good, next level good, always opens doors. It opens them in New York City and in Damascus, Syria. Why do you reckon Indiana Jones cared so much about his hat? Why do you reckon T.E. Lawrence always had perfectly coiffed hair? Fashion is the highest art, and so I delved into Esquire and Vanity Fair and even Women's Wear Daily, taking notes and crafting an overall aesthetic that matched what I wanted to be. And then the jumbo jets crashed into the Twin Towers. I was lying in bed when my mother called and told me to turn on the television. She was crying like the rest of America and trying desperately to understand how this could be happening. Was this terrorism? Who could hate us so badly? I didn't have answers and continued watching the coverage all day. It was such a tragedy, and as it became clear that it was a terrorist attack perpetrated by a man named Osama bin Laden who came from Yemen, I stopped caring about the tragedy itself and started to wonder about Yemen. Yemen was on the Indian Ocean, and the more I looked at maps, the more I figured it must have surf. Some of the best waves in the world are found in the Indian Ocean, but no one had ever surfed mainland Yemen. So I drove over to my best friend Josh's house, whom I met hitchhiking in rural cartel country Mexico, and we looked at more maps together and concluded, yes, it must have surf. 6 months later, we landed in Sana'a, Yemen, and spent the next 3 months driving up and down the coast surfing. We found waves, we were chased by Al-Qaeda, we shot old Kalashnikovs in the desert and laughed. We lived a wild adventure and wrote about it for Surfer and Australia's Surfing Life magazines. It was my first taste of surf journalism, though it was not a normal taste. It was not palm trees and cocktails in a setting sun, which is what I assumed surf journalism was. It was desert and bullets. The stories were well received by the surf community, but even better by hip culture magazines, so before we knew it, we had abandoned surf writing and were doing more wild adventure stories in Lebanon, Syria, and Colombia for the likes of Brooklyn's Vice magazine. I would pitch the most outlandish ideas possible, like finding corrupt gangsters in Damascus, or searching for the roots of grime music and its relation to piracy along the Somali coast. Somehow, the magazines would bite, and then we would go and make it all happen. It was a great ride, always with Josh and always on edge. Television eventually came calling, and Fremantle Media, makers of American Idol, signed us to an option deal. They wanted to develop a show based on our travels, but their ideas were dumb. We'd sit in endless meetings listening to producers blather on and on about how cool it would be for us to go to the Timbuktu Music Festival, or Lima, Peru for its exotic cuisine. Eco-foodie oral travel is never cool. And then Israel invaded Lebanon in response to Hezbollah rocket attacks and the kidnapping of Israeli soldiers. Just like after 9/11, this aggression was the impetus for a creative response. Josh and I told Fremantle to fuck off, and Al Gore's Current TV assigned us to cover the war for them. We covered it like we thought wars should be covered, treating all of Lebanon like a giant playground, renting the finest car we could, eating steak dinners in Beirut's Tony Christian neighborhoods, and generally watching the city burn to the ground. This real declared war felt wholly surreal. It felt like life might end at any moment, and there was the requisite sadness, but there was also a party atmosphere. We lived it up. We had spent much previous time here, so we knew where to party, how to get around, and how to get deep into trouble. Hezbollah controlled a sizable chunk of central Beirut called the Dahia, which was very off-limits to Westerners of any sort, and especially reporters. Yet one cloudless day, as Josh and I were riding our unfortunate motor scooters, we heard bombs raining down on the Dahia, and we knew we had to go in. We were speeding through a rubble-strewn street toward a plume of smoke when another bomb exploded a block away. It blew us off our scooters, catching my awful jeans in the chain, and broke our ears. We sorted ourselves out, restarted our scooters, and tried to race away, but got shot at by either Palestinian or Hezbollah militia, and then got grabbed by a mob of dirty youth who handed us over to official Hezbollah. That was that, my whole cinematic adventure rushing toward a fitting but bummer end. And now I'm in the back of their Mercedes sedan with a gun pressed to my temple and pouring with sweat. My t-shirt is soaking wet, and all I can hear is rapid-fire Arabic, which I'm piecing together 1 out of every 10 words. My ears are still ringing.